So tell us what a profection is and why it's useful to know where you're at when it comes to your personal profections.
Profections is the ancient 12-step program, as I like to say. Profections, first of all, are not progressions. They don't necessarily introduce something new. It's like they do, but what they're really doing is they're stimulating the promise of the natal chart. Just make your second sign your new first sign.
Wow. And it's also giving new context for why some astrologers are very adamant about decoupling the houses from the signs.
It offers a very simple system that encourages you to embrace a planet in your nativity that maybe you don't spend enough time with. Just like reading a great book, it's a different book every time you read it. Why? Because you're different.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. Today, we have a topic to cover that some of you may be familiar with. Others of you may have heard the terms and went, I wonder what that is. And for some of you, it'll be completely new. But no matter who you are, I know it is going to be fruitful. So welcome. We are so happy that you're here. I am here today with Earth astrologer, also known as an astrologer astronomer, Gemini Brett. He has been teaching and practicing astrology for over 12 years at this point. He is also an upcoming inner circle astrologer for the Sagittarius lunar cycle. And he has been around the Astrology Hub family for many, many years, both as a professional and a teacher, and also as a dear friend to me and my little family here. So, Brett, welcome back to the show. I'm so happy you're here. And we have to start with the obvious, because it was the first thing I saw when you came on screen, and probably for a lot of people who know you, the first thing they're noticing as well. What is with the football jersey?
Oh, and you know it's a football jersey. Cool. Well, you might suspect it's because of the Eye of Ra that's conveniently tucked into the Seahawks logo.
Look at that.
See that in green.
Oh, that is amazing.
That's interesting. We see a lot of stuff like that in professional sports logos. But no, it's because we're here today to talk about profections. And Profections is the ancient 12-step program, as I like to say. I mean, really, astrology is. And 12-year systems, which annual Profections take us through, bring us back 12 years ago, which is when my Seahawks won the Super Bowl.
Well, there you go.
I'm also in a Cancer year, so I'll share more about why that is. But one of those things brings us into family, right? And I'm one of those men who maybe only related to dad emotionally through sports. Not proud of it, but it's true for many of us, And I always wonder about our teams, for those of us who do the sports thing. There's something about family in it. Is it an 11th house consideration? Because it's like a community. I always call the 11th teams, hopes and dreams, and a lot of sports are hopes and dreams as well. But it's so for and so root and so where you're coming from and that kind of trip, So anyway, relevant, but I think most importantly today because 12 and Profections is a system of 12ness, like so many things astrology.
Well, I could certainly relate with the whole family and sports thing, and I'm sure many people can. Let's start big picture. What are profections? Sometimes I'll talk to you or Anna or other astrologers, and they'll say, "Oh, you're in a blank year.
Yeah.
You're in and it's like, ooh, what is that? What does that mean?" So tell us what a profection is and why it's useful to know where you're at when it comes to your personal profections.
Yeah, profections, first of all, are not progressions. The words sound similar, and it's not the same thing. Progressions are fractal timing techniques where, the most commonly used progression is turning days into years. So I'm about to turn 50 years old, and for some reason we say, therefore, the chart for when I was 50 days old is very relevant. which is intriguing. The most intriguing thing about it is that it works, right? So very importantly, profections are not progressions. From what we know, profections are much, much older. They go all the way back to the Hellenistic astrology. And I think I'll just share a little bit of my own journey of coming to profections, and because it completely changed my astrology, kind of my cosmology and my worldview.
Wow.
I'm still kind of upset about it, honestly, because I'm very much a sky guy. Amanda introduced me as an astrologer, astronomer. For me, that's what Earth astrology is. Like, I'm very not much like I'm not a materialist, but I like to be that in my like astrology, right? Like I love a transit. This morning I woke up and I saw the moon conjoined Jupiter. So that won't be true when this episode is aired, okay? But the day that we are recording it, I hope it's okay to say that, it's a different day, right? Like I woke up and I saw a moon with a very bright being, and I was like, wait, is that moon Venus? It's like too high. Oh, that's moon and Jupiter, right? And I was just kind of wiping the stuff out of my eyes. And I went out and just was with that for a bit. I was like, oh, well, that's also in my like profected sign. So what a wonderful time to be recording this, right? But I like that idea of a transit, right? Like I like to be able to see moon and Jupiter together. I like to be able to point to something in the actual sky. That's one thing I love about astrology that sets it apart from different divinatory traditions, like the cards or the tiles or whatever else, because there's this physical framework happening and these wheels within wheels and cycles and planets moving through our solar system and how they're aligned with Earth, right? It's like influencing our energetic experiences, Earthlings. And so I really love that like physical, real, if you will, like nature of astrology. It just never ceases to amaze me. And so profections were a bit of a challenge for me because when it comes down to it, it's really just a counting technique. And I was introduced to them, and I think many astrologers these days can say this. I was introduced to Profections by Chris Brennan. That happened for me at a NORWAC conference, the Northwest Astrological Conference. Maybe it was 12 years ago. Maybe it was in 2013. But I think probably 2014. I don't know. Anyway, I'm a quick study, right? So as I was learning about this technique from Chris at a lecture at NORWAC, I started going back in time and just applying this technique to my own chart. I was like, wow, that really, really works. And yeah, I'm still a little bit angry about it because from like the physical material point of view, it kind of makes no sense.
Huh.
And the other thing, and I'll say what it is and more about it as we go here, friends, if it's new to you. But the other thing about it is it really depends upon the ancient system of dispositorship. Okay, so now the word that's used instead of dispositorship these days is rulership. And it's one I still tend to avoid. All right. And it's one of the reasons why it's been most difficult for me to just kind of embrace profections, or why it was such a transition and transformation for me, is because I came at that time from a school, the first place I started studying astrology, from the shamanic astrology school, where they don't do rulerships, or they don't do dispositorships. And Daniel Jamario, who's the founder of the shamanic astrology paradigm, he was studying with Dane Rudhyar, famous humanistic astrologer, and Rudhyar was really going that way as well. And for Daniel, the thing that he beautifully says is like, well, each place on the wheel of life has its place, right? So like every place is sacred, right? So why should Venus in Libra be in any way more empowered than Venus in Aries, for example, right? That being said, when in that school, or I feel like in any school, they're teaching Venus and then they're teaching Libra, you're like, well, those things kind of sound pretty similar, right? And I think, in my studies at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, like that was honored, but it really wanted to get away from this idea of like detriment.
Right. Like good or bad.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
which is like the most detrimental term in astrology. Now, that being said, like I've come to really embrace the medieval term that was used when a planet's, let's just say, in a sign all the way in the opposite side of the world from its home, right? So Venus keeps a home in Libra, right? And so Aries is on the other side of the world. Like they said, in exile. So it's kind of like a stranger in a strange land, or far away. And so you're like just kind of participating in a world with different culture and different customs and that kind of thing, right? So how do you get on in that place? And many of us have had that experience, and it can make sense. Another way I like to put that forth in my teachings these days is, like so many will teach you, there's this wonderful metaphor where actors or planets are like actors, and the signs are like the roles that they're playing. And the aspects are like the different relationships between the actors, actresses on the stage, and the stage or the set is like the houses, right? Like you can go a long way with that metaphor. And we know some actors, actresses are like typecast to play a certain role.
Yes.
Right. And so, Venus is like typecast to play Libra, where Aries would be like a role that's very kind of almost opposite to a role that she's typecast to play, for example, right? So anyway, Profections, I feel they don't completely demand, like at the most surface level, they don't demand a relationship to dispositorship, to this key of ancient astrology that is common to most astrological paradigms and practices these days. But it really, for me, I was saying like, whoa, that stuff really works. And what is this? So profections are one of the ancient timing techniques that belong to a set that are called Time Lord techniques, right? And as much as I don't love this word rulership, I don't love the lords and ladies talk in ancient astrology that much either. But I think most of us have had that experience. Like Anna and I sold our house this year. And now we're renting for a little bit as we figure out what's next. And we have a landlord and a landlady.
It's
right?
true.
And
Yes.
that's really what the old language was about. So I'm in a Cancer year, and so the moon is the lady of the year for me, right? It's like I'm moving through this sign. It's confusing. Back in the day, what we now called signs, they called houses.
Oh.
What we now call houses, they called places, topos, which kind of on one level means the places, like the places in the heavens that you're looking at, right? Or the topics, right? And so this is kind of confusing, but it's actually helpful, because if you think of Cancer as the house of the moon, you can really understand this thing. Like, okay, if I'm like living in Cancer, this morning I watched Jupiter in Cancer, like Jupiter's hanging out in the moon's house. And then the
Okay.
landlady come to visit him, right? And so, depending on your relationship with your landlady, that might be the greatest blessing ever. She might be coming to fix that dishwasher that's been leaking, or whatever, right? Or she might be coming to see if you're messing up the yard or something, and like coming by unannounced, or right? So it also invokes these images of the relationships between the different planets in your nativity. Right? Like any timing technique, transits, progressions, directions, profections, circumambulations. I use so many of them. Like, I love that I was taught this by Gary Caton, like very early in my studies. Like, they don't necessarily like introduce something new. It's like they do, but what they're really doing is they're stimulating the promise of the natal chart. They're activating it. Right? So the chart in some ways can kind of be like spring loaded, and a timing comes around, and then that thing is animated. And it depends, I would suggest, maybe on a level of free will or soul readiness or something like that. Why for one would this kind of activation be a tub stove, or what am I trying to, stubbed toe? Or for another, it'd be a tugged stove. Or for another, it would be the death of a loved one. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's different levels of ways that these activations can express. And it seems to me that that should have something to do philosophically with the readiness of the soul in that moment. And that might be a harder thing to see in the chart. You know, you can hear me just like grabbing onto my need for free will to be part of the equation. Because as my study has gone further and further back towards like the Hellenistic origins of what we call Western astrology, you know, you find yourself really dancing with the weird codes of fate and fortune. And that's why I'm saying profections themselves and seeing that they work. It's one of the things that became or like most challenged not only my astrology and the way that I was practicing, but like my cosmology, my religion, you know, like what I think of the world and my place and our place in it.
Mm. I understand that. There's so many times along the astrological journey where it can be like, oh my gosh, is this just entirely scripted? Like, am I just playing out a script that was already in place? And how much will do I have in this equation? But I love what you just said, that the chart is, and I'm paraphrasing, probably not exactly what you said, but that it's essentially loaded with potential. And then there's these timing techniques that we can use to see where the next spring-loaded activation is. And something that Ricky Williams actually said in the Strongest Planet class that he just taught for Astrology Hub, he said that once we start to understand which, and this is a different technique, so I'm just bringing this in for the point of when we understand what our quote unquote strongest planet is as distinct from ruling planet, that it's psychoactive, that the awareness of it actually enables another layer of communication, of actual experience with that planetary being. And potentially what you're talking about is the same thing. You know, once we actually are aware of what year we're in, so you're in a moon year, that awareness may actually enable more of that aspect of yourself to spring into action. And so that is where I do actually see the free will. Like, you don't have to look into these things.
Right.
You don't have to have an awareness of it. You don't have to even dance with it once you know it. But you do. You go out and you look at the moon. You see Jupiter. You know, so there is a participatory aspect, I think. But I understand the like internal wrestling with how much of this is scripted, how much like actual will do we have in our lives.
Yeah. And a nice thing about Profections is they kind of bring you through an opportunity to be with a different planet as a main focus each year and each month. I mean, you can bring this down to each day. By the way, we'll talk about yearly Profections today to keep it more simple.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reason why it challenged me so much is because, you know, planets are obviously very physical and something we can see. Now that stops at Saturn. Well, I have seen Uranus with my naked eye, and Vesta in the same night. So I've been initiated, and that's kind of a different story. But, you know, you have to be with the dark sky at a very special time to eyeball Uranus. And I would never have done it without, like, you know, one of these things to point around and see which of the dots next to the dots was that being, right? Like, I received the rays of the sun reflected off of Neptune to my own eyeball through a telescope some time ago. And, you know, like, what does that do to you? That's interesting. But I can, like, watch Saturn.
Right.
Slowly moving through the constellations and through the signs, which are different things. I can watch Jupiter and Mars, right? I can see Venus. I love to. I can see Mercury sometimes, not as often because Mercury stays so close to the sun, right? Like, I can't see the sun moving through the stars because I will go blind trying, and that's a very important thing that I think folks forget. And I can watch the moon move through, right? So traditionally we have these 7 planetus, which means the wandering stars, right? The Moon closest to us, the Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. That's like the old worldview of the heavenly spheres, right? These are these different energetic influences on our earthly experience. And of course, astrology teaches that as the planets are moving through the signs, they're going to inspire us in different ways or activate us in different ways, right? Mm-hmm. And, the planets are quite physical. The houses, once you learn what they are and to see them, like it's a very just physical thing. Signs, despite like the tormenting teachings of modern day astronomers who try to suggest that especially tropical signs have no rhyme or reason and they're out of date and all this stuff, and there's really 13, not 12, and of course there's 12. Like the signs are actually quite physical themselves, and it's a long story of what they are, but like I've initiated myself into knowing that, and I'm devoted to teaching and sharing that because I'm one of these cats who wants to like understand the framework of the thing. And I don't think everybody should, right? Like I know great astrologers who don't know the astronomy, for example. I know it's helpful if you really get your feet on the ground and engage with the marriage of heaven and earth and like understand the framework and the face of the clock that we're studying with. And I think it's not only helpful like to your astrology, to your experience as a being, but it's also nice to be able to respond intelligently to the rationalist attacks. All right. But like, I'll just say like signs, houses, aspects, the geometrical relationships between the planets. Yesterday I saw the face of the moon and I was like, oh, she's quintile the sun. And I could just tell by the shape of her smile. You know what I mean? And this was like a daytime moon. I could put my hand to the moon and my hand to the sun. I could feel that like 72-degree thing in my body. It's just so real. I love that. But why would I say that the moon is home in Cancer? Or that the sun is hanging out with Mercury in Mercury's house of Virgo, which was happening yesterday and during all this too, right? Or Venus is at home in Libra, but Mars is not. Or, where does that come from? Like, is that physical? Is it real?
Yes.
We can look to the Thema Mundi, the chart of the world soul, through which it is said we were first presented with this code from Mercury, from Hermes Trismegistus himself, of like the relationships between planets and signs, Sun and Leo, Moon and Cancer, Mercury and the neighbors to the lights of Gemini next to the moon and Virgo next to the sun, and then Venus's signs and Mars's and Jupiter's and Saturn's signs. Like there's this old beautiful code that seems to relate to the seasonal experience of the sun through the northern hemisphere experience of the signs. Mm-hmm. Right? So you can hear like I'm always just begging to understand the physical framework in the math. You know what I mean? And because the skeptic in me is afraid that we're just seeing these things come true because we're suggesting they should. Right? Or I'm afraid that I can just learn enough techniques and approaches that I can make a chart say anything I need it to in the moment. I don't know that would necessarily be bad, by the way. I always like to say, like, if you're sitting with a chart and helping somebody help themselves, like you're doing good astrology, it's all right. You know what I'm saying? But there's something in me, the mathematician in me, that wants to be a reason, a purpose for all this stuff, right? Okay. And then the other thing about profections, and I'll share more about what that is, like, it's not really in accordance with astronomical timings. It is and it isn't. Whereas like a transit, Jupiter taking about 12 years to go around. So I see Jupiter in Cancer now, and I know how to see that in the sky. And I know that, oh, wow, 12 years ago when I was really starting to practice in astrology, like Jupiter was there. Now, importantly, Jupiter's transit of the zodiac is not 12 years. It's what we teach. And Jupiter is often referred to as the year king, because the idea is Jupiter is going to spend a year in each sign and then take 12 years to go through the 12 signs. And that's really convenient and beautiful and in a sense kind of cute. But it's not like Jupiter changes signs on January 1st or on a solstice or on the equinox if you're more hip to astronomical calendars, or on the Chinese New Year. Or, you know what I'm saying? And Jupiter does not spend 1 year in each sign. And Jupiter actually takes 11.86 years to go around, not 12. And that just sounds like nerdy need for precision, but it starts to really matter because, like, if you live a long life, your most powerful Jupiter return will be on your 83rd birthday. And just cast your 83rd solar return chart, you astrologers, and you'll see why, right? And 83 is not a 12. 84 is a 12. 84, Uranus is 7 times 12. 83 is not, right? So, like, we want to understand the kind of general, but then also get particular. But there is a 12-year system of astrology, and that's called annual profections. All right. You want to reflect on any of that before
No,
we go
because
forward?
I just know I can feel them going, what is it?
Right. Sorry. Too much foreplay. All right. So, but let's get to it this way. You were speaking before about this idea of like a strongest planet or a ruling planet, right? Let's go with that later thing. Who is your chart ruler, which is a technique that's often taught. Usually in modern astrology, they're going to look to the planet that rules the ascending sign. I'm born Gemini rising, therefore Mercury, right? Now, in the old astrology, there were all sorts of different approaches to get after what they called the victor of the chart, or some say like the leader of the chart. There were all these beautiful maritime metaphor stitched into the ancient astrology, right? Like who owns the boat? Who's steering the boat that you're on, and those kinds of things. And actually, I prefer that latter, which is the same thing as the so-called chart ruler of the planet that rules the ascendant, right? So traditionally, the ascendant was known in a few ways. One was the horoscopos, right? So a horoscope is not a newspaper column. It's not your sun sign. It is the ascending sign and your rising sign, your ascendant degree, right? So that's the horoscope. So I was born, for example, Gemini rising, and therefore Mercury is the lord of my horoscope, right? Gemini, Mercury's house. That's the landlord, right? I prefer another term that was the oiox, which means the rudder. So your ascendant is your rudder, right? And if you, like me, were born with a Gemini, if you, like I, were born with a Gemini ascendant, then Mercury is the steersman of your chart, right? He's the planet with his hand on your rudder, steering you through life, right? If you were born Cancer rising, it would say you're a child of the moon. The moon is the steersman, or if you prefer, like the steerswoman of your life's design. If you're born Leo rising, then the sun is the steersman. Virgo, Mercury, right? Libra, Venus, that old code. Scorpio traditionally would be Mars, not Pluto, right? Mars is nocturnal, or some would say feminine side. What happens when we take that away from Mars and reassign it? That's an interesting question, right? But back in the day, if you see that what's called the thema mundi, or the chart of the world soul, just know that we have the lights in Cancer and Leo, right? So moon in Cancer and the sun in Leo next to each other. And then you just blossom out from there according to planetary speed. So Mercury is the next fastest planet. He has Gemini and Virgo next to the moon and the sun respectively. And then Venus has Taurus and Libra next to Mercury's signs, right? And then Mars is next to Venus's signs in Aries and Scorpio. And then Jupiter next to Mars in Pisces, now known as a Neptunian thing, right? But traditionally that's Jupiter's nocturnal sign, and Sagittarius, fire, Jupiter's diurnal, day-like sign. And then Saturn is the only planet that's like next to, the houses next to each other, right? In both Capricorn and Aquarius. So if you were born with Aquarius rising, many, modern astrologers will say that Uranus is the chart ruler, right? Aquarius has kind of been reassigned to Uranus. What does Saturn think? Traditionally, that's Saturn sign. Most folks who are studying profections are studying it more through a traditional astrological lens, where Aquarius is Saturn's sign. right? Saturn's diurnal sign, Capricorn being Saturn's nocturnal sign. So I'm going to share this with that kind of traditional Time Lord imagery, but you do you.
Well, and Brett, I've heard other astrologers say that if a technique, and maybe it was even you, if a technique was started in a certain framework, that it's best to practice it within that framework because that was the way that it was designed. So if this comes from traditional astrology, for example, probably using the traditional rulerships would make sense. Yes? Have you
Yes,
played around with it with modern rulership? Like, does it still seem relevant?
I have a bit, and I've definitely talked to astrologers who argue like it really works that way. I kind of think depends on how you're wired. Dr. Jen Zart, friend of
Yeah.
Astrology Hub, is the voice I often hear in my head because Jen will say that she uses the house system implied by the technique,
Yes.
right?
Okay. Yes.
And she has a much more eloquent way of saying that. But I like that. For me, it's like I use many house systems, but I base that on the astronomy of the house system.
Mm.
And I see the different house systems have different ways to speak to different parts of you. You and I had a conversation about that on the Astrology Hub podcast some time ago.
Yeah.
For me, whole sign houses for profections, not only because that's for the most part what the Hellenistic astrologers were up to, and this is a technique that goes back to Hellenistic astrology, but mostly because it's a counting technique.
Mhm.
And before I say more about that, let me just share that, for thousands of years, astrologers were using profections with other house systems, like Alcabetius houses, somewhat similar to the Placidus house system, would have been likely what was most used with profections through the medieval period, for example.
Mm.
Or many of the astrologers, like in the William Lilly era, who are very fond of the Regiomontanus house system, would have been using profections with that house system, a quadrant house system, where you're going to have intercepted signs and all sorts of things that might take us beyond the scope. I like whole sign houses, which I imagine you've all now been introduced to, are quite literal. The idea is whether you have 1 degree or 29 degrees of the sign rising, the rising sign is the rising sign, right? So I was born with 9.5 Gemini rising, proud of it. It's all Deberon, whatever. But the idea is in whole sign houses, my first is Gemini, right? And therefore my second is Cancer. Amanda, what's your ascendant?
14 degrees Aquarius.
Right. So Aquarius. And traditionally they would therefore say Saturn is the steersman of your journey. However, while that would be true for life, right? So Saturn for you, or Mercury for me, we also get to move through this system of Time Lords. And there's many, many Time Lord techniques. I've become a huge fan of what are called primary directions and circumambulations, which is a very different time set that helps you understand like superpowered planets for particular chapters of your life.
Mm.
But annual Profections is a very beautiful and simple one, and it's like the main vehicle I utilize to help introduce some of the traditional approach to astrologers like me who were first informed through a modern astrological approach.
Yeah.
I like to do, true to the Gemini moniker and my ascendant, I like to do many. I like the modern thing, the ancient thing. I think an important thing to state here is one of the great differences between modern and traditional astrology is modern astrology, as we know, it's kind of like psychological part work, right? And like the moon is your feels and habits and memories, and Mercury is the other side of the mind and thought, and the Venus is the heart and love, and Mars is the will, those kinds of things, right? That's a very powerful approach to astrology. Traditionally, you are one planet. So if you were born with Aquarius rising, you're Saturn.
Mm.
You were born with Gemini rising, you're Mercury. And the other planets are different actors in your world, right? Or different things. All right. So anyway, my chart has been activated, kind of reinformed recently through the birth of our child, right? Of Maya. I would go sit with astrologers and they'd ask me about children in my life. Why? Because the steersman of my chart, to use the old term, right? The ruler of the ascendant, for me is in the 5th house, which is children. Now, it's also passion and romance and risk, which speaks of all sorts of different journeys on the river of my life, good and bad. It's also creativity, and I'm an artist, right? Like I was a touring musician in the last life of this lifetime. But it's kids, right? And until Anna and I came together, I thought that ship had sailed. But Anna had at that time, 3-year-old boy, Koa, who's now 10, right? And so I kind of stepped into that daddy-ish stepdaddy world. And then last year, now almost a year and a half ago, Maya, our daughter, was born, right? And so like that idea of the 5th house, right? Many will think of the 5th as Leo, right? But in the Gemini map, as I like to call it, the 5th is Libra. Right? And you could just count Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, right? So I have a Libra Mercury who's in the 5th of the Gemini map or Gemini chart to which I was born, right? Gemini rising. And nowadays, what am I doing early in the morning when the sun's about to rise, right? So the sun's in the 1st. I'm like picking out clothes for my baby girl. And I'm doing this Libra fashion thing. And by the way, typically we'll do that informed by the planet of the day, right? So we're recording this on a Tuesday, Mars's day. She's wearing some red fiery thing, right? For Mars's day. And on Mercury day, I usually dress her in this shirt like with birds, which for me is a very mercurial thing. And one of the ways that Mercury gets his strange messages to us, right? Yeah. And on Sunday, she'll wear the sun and some yellows and things like that, right? And I know that's something that many of you do. It's another piece of the cosmic code. It's like, well, where is that? Why is the Sunday the day of the sun? Why would we go sun, moon, Sunday, Monday, and then jump to Mars for Tuesday? And there's really beautiful ways to see that in study of music, mostly, and also in the 24 hours and that system, tale for another time. But it's just something I do. And it's helped me kind of activate or let my 5th house Libra Mercury express and guide my journey in a whole new way. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Maya was born when I was in the 1st house year. And for me, the 1st house is Gemini. So we might have expected twins, but no, where is the Lord of my 1st, to use the old language, in the 5th of children? And so I had a quite literal experience during a 1st house year with Maya's birth. Okay, well, let me take it to Maya. So Maya was born, I'm not going to share her rising sign, but she has a guide, right? And then she turned 1. And she entered the 2nd year of her life. So let me just share with you how this technique works. It's very simple. It's the ancient 12-step program. And again, I prefer whole sign analysis for this because while it is an annual technique, and while annual is astronomical, right? The amount of time it takes the Earth to circle the sun, or from our point of view, for the sun to circle through our signs, Earth, zodiac, our 12-step system, right? We're also going to start from your rising sign, which is as astronomical, as Earth-astronomical as it gets, right? Because Amanda, you born with the 15th degree of Aquarius on the rise, and therefore 15 Leo setting, and I mean 15th, so that's 14 plus. That's the ground beneath your feet. That's the bed beneath mama's back. Now, birthing mothers, there's better positions, okay? But regardless, you know what I'm saying? Like, that is the earth. That is the ground. So I have a really hard time when people just say like the ascendant is just some mask you wear or whatever. Like it is literally the planet Earth, the ascendant descendant axis, the horizon. You can hear a lot of Horus in that, right? A lot of Horus in the hours and such, right? So I hope you can embrace like your ascendant as like the Earth, right? And so like what was rising when you rose in that house, to use the old term, that sign, right, has so much to do with your journey. In the old language, it is your horoscope, it is your rudder. Okay, well, if that's the horoscope, then, you know, whose house is that? If that's the rudder, then what planet has his hand on the tiller and is going to steer you through life, right? It becomes a very interesting and important consideration, right? And so I'm like Gemini rising, I'm Mercury for life. As you can tell, I like to talk. But what happened when I turned 1? So we say this, when you turn 1 years old and you enter the second year of your life, that's a really important thing and phrasing it that way is to help clear up some confusion. Okay. So when you turn 1, you enter the second year of your life, right? You're in the first year from 0, from your birth to 1. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when you turn 1 and you enter the second year of your life, we say the ascendant profects, Profect, the ascendant profects to the second sign. All right. And again, I like whole sign houses because it's just like you take this 12-sided thing. So I'm holding up a hexagon, which has 12 sides and 12 points. And it just turns once. And it turns once the next year and once the next year, like that, right? So my Gemini rising design, now I can consider it through, what if I was born with Cancer rising?
Yeah. So then the moon becomes the rudder?
The lady of the year. It's like she takes over with her hand on the rudder for some time.
I mean, Mercury's still there, but maybe she's guest starring for a little bit.
Right. So I'll just say like, okay, for me, it's Gemini for life, moon for the year. And there's different ways we can get into the months and even get more particular. And that's something I taught in the class at Astrology Hub when I was an inner circle guide some time ago. Actually, like in the 3 classes, as I want to do, where I always offer too much. But yeah, like how do we also go in this year? How do we perfect from one month to the next? Becomes really interesting. So then you have like a planet for the month, a planet for the year, a planet for the life.
Okay. So I'm currently 47 years old, which means I'm in my 48th year of life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And 48 is a 12.
Yes.
You're in the 12th house year.
I'm in the 12th house.
Yeah.
So my 12th house is ruled by Saturn, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, it is. So let me bring it back to baby, and then we'll finish there. Okay.
Okay, great. Yes.
So, I mean, interestingly, let's just consider a 15-month-old child. That's what I'm dealing with over here. And it's amazing. And it can be challenging. Maya has this thing right now. It's really fun. She just grabs a bunch of stuff and walks around with it. She just started walking, which tends to happen for most children in a second house year. It's kind of interesting. You might think that should happen in a third house year. Well, in a third house year, like speech is one of the main developments that's very typical for a child, right? But in the second house year, what is the second? Now, I like to say it's my needs, like most fundamentally. But like I always want to get to like what's the complex of a house, like, and for me, it's like survival. So people teach the second is money. Now that's something I need so I can eat. The cult of the culture to which I was born, right? We now talk about the second is values. But like if I don't value that I have worth, right, then like why should I even live? Do you know what I'm saying? Like these are like some of the complexes of the second that I think are meant to come to life during second house years, no matter what your rising sign is. And so some of you won't know your birth time and therefore you won't know your rising sign. And then it might just feel like this technique is not for you, but you can still know that, for example, when you're 49, you're in a second house year, or when you're 47, you're in a 12th house year. And that can be very helpful. And so I'll share a little bit more about how to kind of do the math, or we can even put this image on the screen where you can just now look at how old you are and see which year you are in. Okay.
And the year you're in correlates with the house.
Right, exactly. So if we literally say it that way, like you're in a third house year.
You're in a
You're
third
in a
house.
fourth house year. So
Okay.
Anna and I came together, we were both in a seventh house year. And
Oh,
the
wow.
seventh house is relationship. Of course, that's not going to happen for everybody. And most couples aren't going to be in the same profection. But Anna and I were born the same year. No, we weren't. I'm 12 years older than her.
Mm.
And since this is a 12-year system, right? And I'm like October 24th and she's November 3rd. We're in the same like house in our profections for almost every day of the year besides like a week. So it's pretty interesting, right? It's pretty cool. And we were both in a seventh house year when we came together, which was intriguing. Probably like the greatest career year for me in astrology was a 10th house year.
Mm.
I taught the sacred astronomy course through astrology, right? Like, and many people will see that. Like, there's something about if I'm in a 10th house year, my design is ready to kind of embrace or maybe even change or like really kind of succeed in the ways of the 10th, which is your reputation, your honors, so much of that these days links to our career, what we do, how we give back, etc. All right. So anyway, Maya in her second house year, like one of the ways that I'm seeing it is she'll just like, she's for a while, she'll like grab a shirt and kind of shake it. It's really cute. But now she'll then grab a second shirt and some pants and some of this and this thing, and she'll just walk around with like too much stuff to hold. And the second house can be your stuff. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm really getting to study astrology through this beautiful being. It's like, all right, like how much of that is second? Like for me, I did when I was a kid, I had like a security blanket, you know what I mean? And there's something really second house in that. Well, I have Cancer in the second. And that's in the Gemini design, right? Gemini, Cancer is the second of the Gemini map. Maybe we're more inclined towards a security blanket. It's such a moon kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so this is just a really fun opportunity, especially for students of astrology. How would the second of Gemini being Cancer express itself differently than the second of a Cancer rising chart, which is Leo? Or the second of a Leo rising chart, which is Virgo. So one of the great things about studying profections and moving through your own profections is you get to release yourself from this idea that Aries is always the rising sign, and I say it like that because, modern astrology often teaches us through the natural zodiac. And there is some earth astronomy to that, by the way. 0 Aries is due east. And I mean 0 tropical Aries, not sidereal, not constellational, 0 tropical Aries. That point is due east of the center of the earth, where we are all one, and where we measure astrology from. And therefore, it works like a global ascendant. And I'll even say that the signs, the tropical signs, are like earth houses, okay? But you have your own because you weren't born at the center of the earth. You were born at the surface of the earth, right? And so that sets up your profections, right? And so you're going to start, Amanda, from Aquarius. I'm going to start from Gemini. And if you do this whole sign, it can be very simple, right? So if I know your age, and it's fun that we are in the only science where it's okay to ask somebody their age. You know what I mean? I try to find interesting ways to ask that question.
Right.
But there we are, right? And then if you know their rising sign as well, you can not only tell them like what house, of profection their ascendant is profecting through, but you can also say, okay, what planet rules that house? All right. So just say one other thing, like baby, when she turns 2, like I expect that her wonderful mumblings and things, like she's making the cutest sounds, right? Like Maya walks around with all her stuff going, lordy, 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 lordy. And I'm going to miss it so much when that's gone.
Record it, Brett. Record it.
Oh, I'm doing a
Yeah.
lot of that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Um, but I'm very excited, Gemini rising as I am, to like have conversations with her
Oh,
and
yeah.
see how that goes and all those
Yeah.
things, right? And so I expect her to be putting some sentences together. Koa was like, when we look back at videos of him at her age, like he was way further forward in like kind of the speech than Maya is. But you know, when she's in a third house year, and third for me is skills, tools. So speech is a tool that we develop so that our needs can be met, right?
Okay.
Like skills are the needs of our needs, right?
Yes.
The third is the
Yep.
second of the second. Now that's a weird thing to hear, but like that's another beautiful thing about Profections, and this gets more advanced, but you end up seeing 144 houses. You end up seeing that, for example, the first, okay, so I was born with a Gemini moon, as you were, Amanda. But for you, because Aquarius was rising when you were born, the moon is in your 5th sign, right? Gemini is the 5th sign of the Aquarius design. And for those of you who aren't seeing that, and I really encourage you to draw out 12 charts, like whole sign charts, and put Aries on the ascendant of one, Taurus on the ascendant of another, and really start embracing the relationships of each of the signs to one another from that perspective of how does Aquarius see Gemini versus how does Gemini see Gemini? It's the only sign that's schizo enough to actually answer that question, right? So Aquarius has Gemini on the 5th. Now, if you're looking at a house system like Placidus, Porphyry, whatever, you might not see a Gemini moon in the 5th house of an Aquarius rising chart. But from a whole sign perspective, Aquarius is the 1st, so Pisces is the 2nd, then Aries, Taurus, Gemini is on the 5th, right? And it kind of brings in a new contemplation. Well, Libra has Gemini on the 9th. What in the Libra journey requires Gemini education? 9th is university and travels and pilgrimage, right? Like Aquarius is Gemini in the 5th. What in the Aquarius way should hold passion for Gemini? Or like Gemini is the fertility of Aquarius. There's like lots of different ways you can ask this question that releases us from the idea that Leo is the 5th.
Right.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
And so you start getting into this, oh, there's actually 12 different versions of the 5th. And there's 12 different versions of the 6th, and you get 144. Do you see what I'm saying? And it really like expands your astrology, like literally exponentially. Okay.
Wow. And if you're new to astrology or newer, or it's okay. Like everybody's starting at a certain point. Brett has probably explained this to me 100 times in different ways. And this is the first time where I'm hearing this the way that he's saying it. And that happens every single time we talk. So, and thankfully he's very patient and explains these things over and over and is dedicated to finding new ways of explaining the things so that we can understand. But that's amazing. I mean, what you just said, because when you first said there's 144 signs, I was like, what is he even talking about? But then you just explained that. I was like, oh, wow. And it's also giving new context for why some astrologers are very adamant about decoupling the houses from the signs. That yes, it can be a convenient learning tool to sort of think of the 5th house as Leo-like. However, that's not going to be true for everybody. So that's why, decoupling it, that's another reason why, because I've heard a lot of reasons why we should decouple them, but yeah.
Supposedly it was Einstein who said, make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. And there's a chance that the natural zodiac teachings make it a little bit simpler and kind of create a construct that's difficult to kind of move away from.
Right. Yeah.
But it's, I think, also a beautiful way to see the geometry. So anyway, this is just a thing that can kind of help you see your natal chart through 12 different points of view. And if I'm looking at myself through the 7th, right, then it's like, how does the other see me?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like my relationship design. It's my relationship to relationship. Do you see what I'm saying? Like if I'm looking at the world through my survival needs, it's a very different animal than if I'm looking at the world through my like home and family. You
Mm-hmm.
see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or if I'm looking at the world through my like career,
Yeah.
or like I actually have a different name than my career name. Like, what is that? Right? Like, here's a fun one just to see. And this is just in the code. Like, the 7th and the 10th are square. Do you ever have challenges in your relationship when you're working too much? Do you have
Mm.
challenges in your work when you're relating too much? Do you see like they're just
Yeah.
inherently square, which
Ooh.
is a bit of a conflict, but it wants to resolve, right? Look at the 1st and the 10th are square. Do you ever feel like you can't be you because you're working so much? Or like your work and you are different people? Do you see what I'm saying? Like this is all in the beautiful sacred geometry of the 12 form structure of I'll say life, but that's in the zodiac, right? And so just like take your wheel literally and turn it one click. I guess for the camera's sake, I didn't turn it this way, right? Just make your second sign your new first sign. And
Make
Amanda, you know that I love astrolocality,
right.
right? And, so what did my chart look like in California in the moment that I was born in Boston? Well, I was born where Gemini was rising, Pisces was rising here. So another thing I love to do is like if I'm in a Pisces year, what would it be if I went to places in my birth moment where Pisces was rising? Do you see what I'm saying? So this is just a wonderful technique. Like it doesn't stand alone. It can be combined with all sorts of other things.
Okay. So what you're saying is when you're in a Pisces year, you don't say Pisces though. Don't you say the house year?
Well, I say it all, and that's like the convenience of whole sign houses, right?
Okay.
So, for example, in a Gemini rising map, I usually use that term for this whole sign chart. Okay.
Gemini
So,
rising chart,
yeah.
Gemini rising map. Yes. Okay.
And Pisces is the 10th sign,
Pisces is the 10th sign.
right? So let me say it this way too. Pisces is the 10th sign of the Gemini design.
Okay. And it's also the 10th house.
It is, but that depends on your house system,
Oh,
right?
but we're using
I
whole
have
sign.
an
We're using whole sign.
Aquarius midheaven. But if you hold whole sign houses, what I'll say about this, like the highest point of the chart is not the midheaven. People will teach you again and again that the midheaven's above your head. It's not. That's just ignorant. They don't know that they're wrong. They're wrong. All right. In fact, your midheaven degree, which is the point of the zodiac that was culminating, that was reaching its highest height in the moment of your birth, that was shifting from going up to coming down, and is very important. It is not even the highest part of your chart, meaning the highest part of the ecliptic or the heart of the zodiac, the sun's path. That is what we call the nonagesimal. It squares your ascendant. So it's always in the 10th whole sign. So it's just an interesting thing to know. And there's many different ways that the midheaven was taught back in the day. I'm getting like beyond the field, but just know that there is at least to equal houses where we take your ascendant degree and we start each subsequent house with the same degree. I have 936 Gemini rising, then equal house chart, 936 Cancer is my second, 936 Leo is my third, 936 Virgo is my fourth house cusp, right? 936 Pisces would be the 10th house of an equal house cusp of my chart. That is the point that's highest above the ground. All right. It's always going to be in the 10th whole sign. But I just need to be really careful with my language because most Northern Hemisphere births like myself who have Gemini rising will have that paired with an Aquarius midheaven. And they will then know Aquarius is their 10th house. And so it just gets so difficult. There's always so many complications that come in through the many house systems and which one's right. I just like to say this is how they're different, okay? And I really encourage working at least at first with whole sign houses, especially with this Profections technique. And then you can just literally count, right? So let me say something about like how would you count too. So it's a 12-year system. When you turn 12, you're back to the first house. Okay. So when you turn 12, you enter the 13th year of your life, you're in your 13th sign, which is the first. Because there are 12 signs, not 13. It's a 12. Creation creates in 12s, and I could go on and on about that. All right. So when you turn 24, you're in the first house year. When you turn 36, you're in a first house year. When you turn 48, Amanda, as you will in January, you will go to the first house year. So if you're 47, you're almost to 12, right? You're almost 48. That means you're in the 12th house. You're back in the womb. You're in the mysteries, in the mania, and the, beyond the veil. And I see you nodding as if this is true.
Oh, fully resonant. Yes.
And that's so weird, right? Like, why would this work? That's what I was saying. If it just like hurts me, right? Then as you shared before, you have an Aquarius ascension, and that means from a whole sign point of view, Capricorn is your 12th. And so we say you're in your 12th house year, you're a Capricorn year, and Saturn is the Lord of the year. So we're very interested, for example, of Saturn currently transiting between Pisces and Aries, as we know, right? We say like in a Saturn year, pay particular attention to transits to your natal Saturn, transits by Saturn, right? Wow. So where is Saturn now? Where is Saturn dancing through your signs? Saturn in Aries. Aries is the third of the Aquarius design, right? Let's count them together. Aquarius, Pisces, Aries. So what are some third house things? I don't know, books, writing, you're speaking, sharing, right? Saturn might ask us to explore the things we're constricted in saying. The skills that maybe we've also honed through that barrier, right? I like to say Saturn is the wall that we push against until we're strong enough to break through or wise enough to see the stairs built into it, right? And so Saturn tends to bring lessons through sometimes prevention or just like wait for Saturn. Pace wins the race, And so if you're a Saturn year, some of those themes tend to come alive, right? Does any of that speak to your current experience? What you're
Are
up
you kidding me? Well, I'm finishing writing a book. It's very much, I keep saying that I'm like 8.5 months pregnant right now with this book. So it's like in the womb. So that is absolutely resonant. It is absolutely giving voice to things that I have never spoken or said to any human on this planet. Not one human on this planet knows everything that is in this. So it is absolutely like breaking through a barrier of, can I say this? Do I want to say this? Is this, is this safe to say? All those things when you really put yourself out there vulnerably. So it's completely resonant. And then when I think about the fact that by the time it's published, which will be, we need to talk about this because I'm not going to hit October 24th, your birthday. It's looking more like November 22nd-ish, which we can talk about later. And I'm saying that because Brett already did, of course, helping me choose a date to publish the book, but I'm not going to make it. So now I'm looking at the end of November. But when it's actually out there and in the world, I will be going into that first house year.
Right. And there'll be a whole new you.
Right.
Now you're an author. Now that might be a 10th house thing because it's an honor. It's part of your reputation. When I say now you're an author, right? Like that's a statement of the 10th house. But the way that you are personally experiencing that, right? And also, the 12th house is mental institution, so be careful. But, why is it? It's because you can go to a church and hear about some guy talking to a burning bush which is all good until you start reporting the news from the bush in your backyard, and then they're going to lock you up. Right. So I'm just saying that as like a little quip, saying that some of the things that you're like, wait, can I say this?
Yes.
And, being very informed as you are in Aquarius has something to do with the whole and the community. And right. So like, oh, I don't want to say something that's going to like turn some people off, or even, I think Aquarius maybe a little bit less, but like, what is this person's opinion of me going to be? Now, I don't know, Amanda, how much of your nativity you're willing to share, but if you are, in which sign was Saturn when you were born?
Saturn and Leo.
Okay, so Saturn's in Leo, right in the 7th. Now, generally speaking, when the steersman of the chart, so again, like the one with the hand on the tiller, the rudder, the ascendant, is in the 7th house, there is something in your personal experience that's going to feel exiled. You're going to be a bit of a stranger in a strange land, right? So we can say that for anybody listening to this because we've all embraced astrology. Like we're doing stuff that's definitely outside of the norm, right? But there's also going to be a lot of attention in the realms of the 7th, which is the relationship realm, right? And so like how much of my journey is going to be informed by the way the other sees me, or the way that I'm designed to look at the world through the other's eyes, right? So in a Saturn year, we should expect like significance in your relationship realms as well. I don't know how much you've talked about this book, but I understand there's like another kind of contributor to this book that's very important, whose words will show up in the book also.
Yes.
Right.
Tasha Alter is providing the astrologer's notes, which is like the astrological reflection and commentary on the story.
So that's a partner.
Right.
Right, which is the 7th house. Now, has it challenged your partnership with your significant other at all?
Well, only imaginarily, because I wrote this book in private for what, I don't know, 47 years, but a year and a half of like really putting my head down and writing. And of course, he's in it. Of course, my former husband is also in it. So, and of course, my family's in it, and many people appear in it. So there was this, is this going to be okay with them? Like, are they going to be okay with the way that they are represented? Of course, everything's represented from my perspective. How is this going to be received? I just finished reading the entire book out loud to my significant other, and he just like, he loves it and was like bawling, and he just was in full support. But I didn't know how it would be received, even by him. Right. So, yeah.
So I feel like that could be the ultimate experience of a year where the planet significated through Profections is in the 7th, right? Especially in Leo, right? Like to receive that reward of the other, just like stoking your flame, right? Like authentically, like assisting you and feeling like confident, right?
Yes.
But also that you've been like, in this 12th house year, kind of in the veil, the womb stuff's happening, but so much of this has to be considering relations and like this relationship, that relationship, like individual relationships. That's like a very 7th house theme. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it's obviously going to be 11th and the communities involved and on we go. And you're right. But, like next year, and this is the true of any 12 year. So 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, 72, 84, 96. These are the 12s, right? And so this is like, it brings you like Koa and Waldorf schools learning the 12s.
Yeah.
Like we only learned like the 10s in my schools. I really appreciate that in like Steiner's thing, like they go to the 12s. I think that's really important, by the way. But like, your 12s, that's when you're first house year. Here's a fun one. If your age is divisible by 6, but not by 12, you are in the 7th house year. So if you're 30, which of course is 5 6s, but not in even 12 multiple, then you're in a 6th, or sorry, I think I said 6, a 7th house year. If it's divisible by 6, but not by 12, it's a 7th house year. Right. And so we would say there's going to be a focus on relationship. Right. But here's a fun one in your chart, Amanda. What sign was the sun and when you were born?
Capricorn.
Capricorn, right? So from a whole sign point of view, Amanda was born with the ruler of the seventh, right? Amanda was born Aquarius rising and therefore Leo setting. So therefore the ruler of her seventh house, being Leo, being the sun, is in her 12th. And this really helps us see what traditionally, Amanda, we call a mutual reception, right, between Saturn and the sun. Because it's a foreign exchange program. Saturn's in the sun's house of Leo, right? And the sun is staying in Saturn's house of Capricorn. Right now, traditionally, those signs are called inconjunct. They're blind to one another. But that mutual reception in your chart, according to some approaches, certainly those that I prefer, it helps you connect the realms of the 7th and the 12th. So on one kind of fundamental level, your relationship to the invisible. It can also, by the way, bring some of the invisible into your relationship, and that's not always so easy. And that
Never.
will kind of be an expression of like free will. There's ways, of course, where that can perform quote unquote bad, or ways that would be difficult to deal with, right? And I'm sure we might get to hear some of that in the book. And there's ways where that can be beautiful.
Right.
Right. You know, in our relationships, will that bring us to spirit? And by the way, you know, we talked about when we were looking at electing the book time, like if it can't come out, then go do a ceremony in Hawaii at somewhere that's been very important on the path. Go to the volcano, or, you know, go where you're called to go.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay, Brett, I remember when Donna Woodwell was teaching Decode Your Cosmic Blueprint for us, like in 2017. When we got to the dispositor part of the class, that is where we saw the biggest drop off of students. Like it was this like people, it was a hard thing to understand. So again, I'm talking to any of you who are like, what mutual reception? What is even, you know, if it's hard to do sort of like what feels like mental gymnastics to follow what Brett just did, it's okay. It's okay. It's gonna continue to make more sense the more times you hear it, the more times you look at charts. So it's okay. But I do remember that. It was like, and I remember even asking her, because I didn't know that much about astrology yet. It's like, do we have to teach that? Like, is it actually essential? because we lost everybody. Like, people just really got confused, you know?
I would suggest one of the reasons why it's difficult is because it's not visible in nature.
Right.
Again, you know, like I watched Saturn move through Capricorn. I mean, I watched the world and that was interesting, but I watched in the sky Saturn move through the sign of Capricorn. And there was nothing that like necessarily confirmed to me that that's Saturn at home. Besides, you know, I like to go listen to the planets instead of talk to the planets. So if I go out to moon, like Jupiter with the moon in Cancer this morning, I'm like, see, Jupiter, you're exalted in Cancer, very close to this degree where you are, you know, like you are an honored guest in the moon's home, and here you are together. And so she's like making you the best tea that's in the house so you can feel really cozy. Like, I'm not listening, I'm telling.
Right.
Right. And so how am I going to get the news? But again, like that's just like, how can I see that Jupiter is somehow exalted in Cancer? Now I can maybe theorize Jupiter's north node's in Cancer. Like, is there something about that? Right? Like, why is the moon at home in Cancer? Well, the moon's very high in the northern hemisphere sky in Cancer. Does that matter? It actually affects the tides. It's such a lunar thing, right? So I'm always questing for something physical, something earthly, right?
Yes.
It might not work that way. Again, it frustrates me because these might be little things in the matrix that are like too microscopic for the human eye. You know what I'm saying? And so I won't necessarily get there, but I think that's one of the challenges of dispositorship in general. Now, in the course that I taught during an inner circle month some years ago now for astrology, it is beautifully illustrated with very simple animations and illustrations that will help you like see this. And for me, the pictures tell more than 1,000 words when we're getting after some of these complex things. So, and just know, like, once you start doing this, as it is with everything in life, in astrology, like, it starts happening for you. So you said this thing before, Amanda, that I'm patient, and you rewind the tape. I was like, I'm not. But one
Being
thing for
patient with
me
me.
is, yeah, it's like just like reading a great book. It's a different book every time you read it. Why? Because you're different.
Yes.
And when I sit with somebody and I see the teachings are starting to like I teach them in a different way, I'm getting better at that. But when I see like they're really starting to be received and seen, and you can just there's a glow.
Mm-hmm.
You like it's because like you're a different person because you grow, which by
Right.
the way is optional, but you're up to it, right? So
Right.
and the most important thing I would just say about Profections is it offers a very simple system that encourages you to embrace a planet in your nativity that maybe you don't spend enough time with or haven't spent that much time with.
Mhm.
There's a thing I didn't say before, so I'll just share a little bit about me. I was reflecting this morning on a couple of things. One was, okay, when I taught that course for Astrology Hub, I'm remembering now I was in an 11th house year. And
Mhm.
Astrology has been a really important community for me. And it's a
Yeah.
community that generally shares a very similar vision of hopes and dreams for a better world, right? Like
Yeah.
this is quintessential 11th house stuff,
Mhm.
right? Um, I have Jupiter in my 11th. So I didn't mention this before, but there's an argument, and it's an age old argument for what matters more, the planet that rules the house of the year or planets that are in the house of the year. Okay. So at that time, I was in the 11th, right? That was just my age, right? So the 11th of the Gemini design is Aries. More convenient to count backwards when we're going to the 11th in a 12 sign system, right? So from Gemini, the 12th is Taurus, the 11th is Aries. Right?
Mhm.
Aries rises before Taurus, rises before Gemini. So I was in an Aries year, so we say a Mars Time Lord year. And then when I consider where's Mars in my chart, well, Mars is in Cancer in the second, right? But I also want to consider that I was born with Jupiter in Aries in the 11th. I also,
Yeah.
this would of course be a Hellenistic consideration, but I have Chiron there. And I was teaching, which is a Chironian thing. I was teaching about some of my own personal wounds, which might be an Aries Chiron in the 11th thing to the community. I have Lilith there when I was born as well. Um, so anyway, one thing I'm remembering is in my monthly profections during the course, and in that I also will share you very simply how to get through your monthly profections and why there's a little bit of argument about which day exactly does the month change. I was in a Taurus month, and in the Gemini design, Taurus is the 12th sign. We went for a walk in nature, which for me is one of the greatest ways to Taurus, always. It'd be better to just sit in nature, actually. And we went for a walk in a place that I called Solstice Hill because it's where the solstice sunset from where we used to live. And there's tons of cows on this hill, right? And so in a Taurus month, I got to walk through this beautiful grassy hillside with all of these cows. And I did that quite intentionally.
Mhm.
What I didn't know I would come across, and it was the first time I saw something, even though I'd been on this hike many, many times, I just kind of went off the trail a little bit. And then I saw this sign talking about the ruins that are right there of a mental institution,
Oh, no way.
12th house, right? So I'm here with the cows, Taurus, and a land in my body, but there's this mental institution thing, right? And so it's fun, as you know, when you start following your timings, whether it's transits, progressions, directions, whatever, you just start really noticing the code appearing in your life, right? So that was like a really fun thing that I got to share with the community. Wow, because I made that like a 3-part class. I was
Yes.
building classes during the month in which I
Yes.
was instructing, which I'm not going to do this time. I keep telling myself that's true. But it's a really fun class where I'm sharing some of my own personal journey. Like in an Aries year, in an Aries month, we went to Monterey, and our dog Isabel bloodied her nose in the hotel. So we came back to the hotel room, and there was blood all over the white sheets.
Oh, no.
And we're like, what the heck happened? So I'm in a Mars year, an Aries year, and come home, and there's blood everywhere. I'm like, well, that's pretty Martian, but oh my God, it's like the dog. And why? Because she was so alone,
No.
right? And so she was like poking her snout through like the door and
Oh,
bloodied herself. I'm sad
okay.
to even say that, of course, right
Oh,
now.
God.
But you can feel like all that complex. Now, of course, that's Anna's dog as well. Koa was with us. You know, like the way we're going to experience different events
Yes.
personally really contributes to the whole things of the majesty. All right, so I might just finish by talking about the shirt that I'm wearing, right? So I'm a Seahawks fan. I put that away during the beginning stages of my weirding, because like I had helped to learn to process my feelings like more purposefully. And I think I was shown how yelling at sports teams, good and bad, was just me needing an emotional outlet, because like so many, maybe especially like so many men in our current state of culture, can't or haven't been trained or taught to or allowed to, right? It's, you know, you'll see a lot of men like really deeply embracing, right, at sports things. And one other thing I can like say that I like about being a sports fan is it's one of the only places you can be where you can really feel like 50,000 people focused on the same moment so intently with so much energy and so much emotion. Like a very powerful thing. Now, if we were doing that around world peace, obviously that would matter more. All right. So
Yes.
anyway, 12 years ago was the 2013 year of the NFL football season, and it's which led to the Seahawks winning the Super Bowl for the only time in their existence. And I was in Seattle at the time. I was at the parade. You know what I mean? And so reflecting back on that life, that time of my life, what's much, much more important was me coming into astrology. I separated from my old job, my old like engineering job, and devoted myself to this, right? Well, I'll just share again in my chart, like Gemini rising, I have Cancer in the second. All right. But there's going to be for me something very personal about that. Why? Because the moon is in the first. So just as you, Amanda, in this 12th house year, exploring the mysteries in these things, there's also a seventh house focus. Why? Because the planet that rules your 12th is in the seventh.
Really?
Okay. Whereas for me in a second house year, Cancer on the second, so the moon, well, the moon is in the first. So there's going to be something very personal about it, right? And so, you know, I like to say this, like my need to be heard. Gemini moon ruling the second of needs. Where does my abundance come from? Right? Like teaching many things can be one of the ways that comes through. Like, but there's also, and this is where this language gets weirdest, so everybody get ready. The first is the 12th of the second. Okay, now you're like, wait, what? Okay, but if you just turn your wheel one time, and in my design, I'm encouraged to consider that, right? I'm Gemini rising with a Gemini moon in the first. Okay, but if I turn it and now Cancer's rising, I see that that Gemini moon is in the 12th of the Cancer design. So I really get to say, oh, wait, okay, Gemini is the 12th of Cancer, which in the tradition is why the moon is said to have some challenges in Gemini, because she's in a sign that can't see her home. That's in the tradition, neighboring signs don't see one another. So there's like a fuzziness there. Right, so there's something built into my design, says this tradition, and it may or may not be true, and it's something I contemplate often, where like there's a need to know who I am, like literally like my survival is built into understanding and even expressing who I am, but I can't quite see that or get it. Right. And then
Mhm.
that's also stitched into the need. Like I want to express the mysteriousness of it all. And it's just inherent.
Maybe that's where what I said when I said you're patient, maybe that's where that comes from, because maybe patient isn't the right word, but I infinitely creative or insistent, that the way you're seeing the world, the way you're absorbing the mysteries, the way that you're experiencing astrology and the sky and all those things, there's an insistence that it be received. So you it's like you try on all these different ways that I might finally get it. And then I do, and it's great. But that's I think that's what I mean, because I see you with this, okay, well, that didn't quite land. Let's try this way. And that story might have been a little fuzzy. Let's try this way. So yeah.
I love that so much. Yeah, I mean, I learned that most importantly when I was tutoring math, which I always love to share, was like my first experience as a healer.
Yeah.
As I was tutoring math to adults who like you could just see that moment, that like one presentation, the woman I always think of, she just couldn't add negative numbers, which is
Mm.
totally understandable. Like a negative number is nonsense. Do you know what I mean? Like
How come I
that's
can't
more
see it?
invisible than dispositorship. Like show me -3. Like you can't. You know what I mean? Anyway, like she just couldn't do it, and you could just feel, like I could feel it in her heart. You know, this was the moment where she was told she was stupid.
Right.
I guys cry every time I think about it. It took me months to like find somehow like the way that she adds negative numbers, like her way, not my way, not the book's way. And she
Right.
did it. And it was like, and I just like looking back, I was like, wow, that's like, that was my first act maybe as a healer outside of my family, friends, whatever. Right.
Amazing.
And
Yes.
it's been so important for me. It's like, it's where I really love teaching individually. It's like, well, how do you receive this part of the code? How do you? But it's also like there's such a glow for me. I don't know if it's patience. I appreciate that you like rephrasing that as a creativity, which
Mhm.
of course paints the idea of the steersman of my natal charts in the fifth.
Mm.
Creativity,
Mm.
right? Um, that like I'm actually getting to experience a different Amanda because you've been initiating yourself in these ways in your study, right? And you're doing it in such an amazing multiple way, right? Learning from so many different astrologers, like you more than anybody, just like it's part of your job. Yeah. It's part of like what you've built for us. But there's another thing I was reflecting on. I invited Demetra George, a wonderful elder of astrology in our community some time ago to come do an event that I'm doing in town. And she's like, I don't know, man. It's like, I can't just keep building these presentations. I was like, well, just please, like, we'd love to have you like use one you've already built before. She's like, we say we would do that and we never do. I was like, oh God, I'm not alone. Like, I hear you. Like, I can't ever just teach this thing that I taught last year again
Right.
because I'm different now and it
Right.
needs to look different and better and all that stuff. You know what I mean, I'm always questing for, well, how can this come across? There's so much of that, of course, for me. And this is, look, the stairs in my charts in Libra, it's going to be informed through how are people receiving it. Do you know what I'm
Yes.
saying?
Yes.
This year, I get to focus on a few things. Look, so I'm in a second house year and a Cancer house year. Look how literal this is. We sold a house, Cancer. What happens when you sell a house? You get some money. Second.
Oh, yeah.
A Mars in Cancer in my second. What happens when we have some money? Oh my God, we're going to lose it all because we're going to do the wrong thing. Where do we put it as we wait to buy a house? Or should we? What's the market doing? What's astrology say, right? Like it's just a mess where I'm fully mental, right? And that's the moon in the 12th, the house of the year.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying? And
Yes.
then next year, as it will be for everybody who turns 50, how do we know? Because 48 is a 12. So 48 is a first house year. And you just go 48, 49, 50. So 50 is a third house year.
48, 49, 50. Okay.
Right? So I
Yes.
get to kind of restructure how I'm sharing, speaking, learning, traveling. The goddess is a third house theme that's been too sadly forgotten by the realms of modern astrology.
I've never literally heard that.
Third is the joy of the moon, right?
Big
I would suggest
Margaret.
it's a very much a quadrant house thing. Like traditionally, the sun has nothing to do with the fifth, but
Mm,
that's how modern astrology teaches it. The fifth equals Leo equals the sun. Well, why
right.
would the sun want nighttime?
Right.
The fifth is beneath the ground. The
Yeah.
sun moves through the fifth in the third and the fourth hours of night. That's why traditionally it's the joy of Venus, passion, romance, creativity, fertility, right? Well, what happens in the middle of the night? The sun moves across the IC. It moves from the fourth to the third, right? And it's the coldest hour. I will say, like, one of my greatest joys as a teacher was on the stones of Sedona, Arizona once. And we're out in the middle of the night, and a beautiful musician who we stumbled across was here playing handpan, and we're doing a just amazing stargazing. And three of the students at the same time were like, dude, the sun just moved to the IC. Because I always teach, as I've experienced, you can feel it in your bones, whether it's warm out or not, right? We can see the sun at the ascendant, that's sunrise. You can see the sun at midday, at the midheaven, that's the shortest shadow of the day. And the sun now was going up and now it's coming down. You can certainly see the sunset, clouds allowing, but you can't see the sun at the IC. It's down beneath the ground. So you have to close your eyes and then you feel it in your bones, right? Because literally, if it's warm out or if it's cold, it just gets wet. Suddenly, and it's a very easy thing to sense if you're open to it. So yeah, like one of my proudest moments, we're out there on the sacred earth, and three people are like, "Oh, the sun just hit the IC," and sure enough, we cast the chart, and there you go, right? Well, think about that. Like, as the sun is moving across that place and moving into the third, it's literally the middle of the night. The sun's just begun his daily climb, and that's why it's the joy of the moon, right? Because it's the darkest. But there's hope of like the return, right? And so traditionally the third is the moon's joy and the goddess, where the ninth is the joy of the sun, the height of the daily light, right? So yeah, learning all these different parts of the code, it also just helps you embrace the sign of the year in a different way. You know what I'm saying? So, but also, like, it's a wonderful opportunity to say, what was I up to 12 years ago? And then an interesting thing, like, I can say, hey, the Seahawks won the Super Bowl 12 years ago, so it's going to happen again. Well, I don't know about that. Because, of course, like, when I look at the transits 12 years ago, they're very different than they are now. Right. So while in this great ancient 12-step program, you're kind of just moving through your design of 12ness 1 year at a time, still no moment is ever the same. You can't step into the same river twice. Not only are you a different person, but that's reflected in the solar system will never, ever, ever express itself in the same sacred geometry more than once. And that's how unique you are. That's how unique this moment is. And the relationship between this unique moment and you is like a very way that we can consider the powerful activations of the astrological transits, right? But the old Time Lord techniques suggest that some of the transits will be more meaningful or more powerful or even more available. That, for example, if you're in a Saturn return during a Saturn year, it's that much more Saturn.
Okay. Well, as you can all see, this goes deep. There are a lot of layers. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of practice. There's a lot of examples. We're going to go and put Brett's annual Profection class that he taught for the inner circle. We're going to be doing what we love to call them shooting star sales, because they come and they go. It's just like a shooting star. So we're going to have a shooting star sale on Brett's class where you're going to be able to get a really significant discount. It was a 3-part class. Most of our mastery classes for the inner circle are like 90 minutes, an hour. Of course, in true, amazing, prolific Brett fashion and generous, he has a 3-part mastery class on annual perfection. So you're going to get lots of the things that you learned here today reinforced, but then you're going to go deeper and learn how to apply this, look at charts. He has amazing visuals as always, so you can see it and actually, like he was saying earlier, once you see something, it's a lot easier to understand it. If you can't see it, it's hard to understand it. So that is the link for that. Actually, it's going to be astrologyhub.com/wheel, astrologyhub.com/wheel. So go check that out if you're interested in taking it deeper. Also, Brett's going to be our inner circle astrologer. So for any of you inner circle members, what is our mastery class going to be about in the Sagittarius lunar cycle?
Parallels.
Parallels. Okay.
Yeah. And I will share that outside of these are two little lines in your aspect grid and into like what they are in the sky, how they are experienced when you're sitting in a stone circle, how they relate to the ancient kind of Babylonian, which honored that high stuff was different than low stuff. And why, in a sense, parallel planets, while maybe they're not walking side by side, they're walking on the same trail and can leave notes for each other and the like. It's a very amazing opportunity to open to a deeper experience of sacred astronomy.
In Ricky's recent class for us, where we were talking about the strongest planet, we also touched on strongest house and strongest aspect in our chart. And I was surprised to find my strongest planet as Neptune, and then very surprised to find my strongest aspect as a parallel. And of course, the next question was like, what the heck's a parallel? We never talk about that. So I'm so happy that you're bringing this in, not only if, for students that have it in their chart, but it is a part of astrology that just truly does not get discussed very much. So I'm very excited you're bringing that in, Brett, and looking forward to your Inner Circle month as always. For any of you, you actually make a cameo in the book, by the way, Brett. Very brief little cameo. I don't know if Anna told you yet, but for any of you interested in following along the behind the scenes journey until we get to the publication date, which after talking to Brett, I'm going to probably have a new date. I'm thinking November 22nd, but it's going to be the end of November at some point. But if you want behind the scenes, if you want stories, if you want sneak peek at chapters, things like that, you can go to lifebythestars.com and follow along with us. I'd love to have you. It's fun. I'm sharing a weekly email, sometimes an audio, sometimes a sneak peek at a chapter, and would love to have you on for that journey. Brett, is there anything else you want to say before we close out here?
Well, I'll say that you were born with Venus parallel Neptune, and everybody should feel that. Yeah, and the 9th is associated with publishing. So you might publish during a 9th house month of your 12th house year, which is totally available. But also
Isn't that November?
November. There's a couple ways to look at it. You can look at the 9th month of the year, right?
Yes.
You can also look at the 9th of the 12th since you're in a 12th house year.
Okay.
And that gets confusing. And then you can also look at the planet that rules that and blah, blah, blah. But I wonder for you, Amanda, if you shouldn't do it on your birthday.
Oh my gosh,
It
don't
will be
say
such
that.
a rebirthing.
No. I know. As you were talking, I was like, do I just wait until January 19th? I mean, I really don't want to do that at this point in time, but we could talk about this later. So everybody, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for enjoying a conversation like this. If you're still hanging out, you obviously are way initiated, and I hope that you were able to get a lot out of this. Just this one conversation alone, Brett is just a wealth of information on this sacred science, and it's just always so amazing. But I have to share one more thing. There's something in Hawaii, I'm sure other people have heard of it in other places, but it's kind of a surfer culture thing. And it's people wear hats or shirts that say blame Laird, which means blame Laird Hamilton for my obsession with surfing. In so many ways. I was thinking this morning, I'm like, blame Brett, because I'm out there talking to the sky in the morning. I'm like, I saw Venus and Jupiter, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I love you. But you inspire so much of the way that I approach astrology. And I know that is true for so many people. So we need to make hats that just say blame Brett. And it's our own astrology geek out thing. The surfers can have their thing. We can have our thing. But I really hope that the Seahawks win the Super Bowl this year for you.
Thanks. Don't tell your brothers that.
I won't. No. That's between you and me. My mom would like that though. She's from Seattle. So
Right on.
yeah. All right. And everybody, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for making astrology a part of your life. Looking forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Go check out Brett's class, astrologyhub.com/wheel. All right. Take care.